Thinking about booking your bucket list trip to Alaska, don't do it until you listen to this podcast.
Welcome to Travel Talk, where our expert magical memory planners discuss ways you can have fun, memorable, stress-free family vacations.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Travel Talk. So, we are talking about Alaska and we are talking about planning for Alaska. And I feel like before you can even start to plan a trip, if it's on your bucket list, there are so many things to think about. And we get a lot of questions. And before we can even recommend an itinerary or, people get kind of to the end, like, what cruise ship should I go on? There's like a lot that happens before that. So, this podcast, we're going to be talking about all the kind of different ways to see Alaska and things you need to think about before you book your cruise. Now, if you have already booked a cruise or you have one coming up in the next year or two, and you're thinking, oh, then I don't need to listen to this podcast. You do, because we are going to be talking about the different cruise ports and special excursions in each of them and things to look for. So even if your cruise is already booked, you're still going to pick up some great nuggets of information here. And I'll also challenge you, if you are listening to our podcast, in case you didn't know, it's on our website, it's on YouTube. You might want to check out this podcast on one of those platforms also, because there's a lot of images in this podcast, most of which are from my own cruise to Alaska. So they are just unfiltered, raw, what you take with your phone camera footage. And it's amazing. And I'm not a good photographer at all. So considering that, just, put that through the lens of how absolutely amazing Alaska really is. It's completely breathtaking. But anyway, so even if you already have your cruise booked, definitely stay and check out this podcast. And then also see if you can find us on YouTube or on our website, because I think you'll enjoy some of the photos. All right, so let us dig in. So the first thing I want to talk about is how to visit Alaska. So there's three main ways to do it. And so I'm going to teach you some of the lingo along the way here too. But sometimes people think about a cruise, which is a great way to see Alaska. There's a lot you can see from a cruise, as when we talk about the ports, that you can't really see when you are doing a land Alaska trip. So one option is a cruise. One option is a cruise tour. And you might be like, I don't know what a cruise tour is. So we're going to talk about that toward the end a little bit in more detail. But a cruise tour basically combines a cruise with a land portion, land tour. So that way you can kind of do both in one. So just keep that in mind. Cruise tour, if you really can't decide, or a land tour. And that would be just a tour of the land. So we're going to touch base a little bit on a map of Alaska and then talk about the land tour first, because that's going to be a briefer discussion. But anyway, I wanted to, and hopefully you're watching this online or watching this on one of our platforms, you can see this map with me, but I wanted to show you a map of Alaska. It is huge. In case you didn't know how big of a state it was, it is really, really huge. And so when we talk about visiting Alaska, people are generally looking at just two of the five regions. So you're either going to the southeast, which is where the cruises go, or if you're doing a land tour or a land trip, you will be heading into the south central portion of Alaska. So a few things that I just wanted to point out about these areas. First of all, for a fun fact, these two regions, the south central and the southeast, are actually rainforests. So when you think of rainforests, you might think of Costa Rica, which is an amazing rainforest. That's a tropical rainforest where it's warm. There's also temperate rainforests where it is cold and wet. And Alaska, these two regions are a temperate rainforest and actually the largest temperate rainforest in the world. And that means that they get between, in some areas, 100 to 200 inches of rain annually. So when people talk about packing for Alaska, they're always like, wear layers, make sure you have like an extra pair of shoes, or you have waterproof shoes, or you have like a rain jacket. They're not kidding. Um, it can be rainy. The weather can change a lot. So that's one thing to think about. The other thing is the Alaska season. So generally, when people are traveling to Alaska, especially it involves a cruise, they're looking during the Alaska season, which is mainly May to September. So May to September is the main Alaska season. And the core part of that season is like July and August. So halfway through June, July, and August. So you'll want to keep that in mind. If you're someone who wants to travel kind of out of season or lower crowds, lower prices, May, September, those are kind of your travel seasons. If you want to be more in the more popular times, or you want to be there in the height of the season, you're looking at July and August. Keep in mind, and we're going to talk about fishing in a little bit, but when you think about fishing and other activities, they are seasonal and there are fishing seasons and times. So you do want to, if those things are important to you about your trip and in the excursion realm of things, you'll want to consider that when picking your dates. Although you might see an awesome date at the end of May that has a really good price, if you were planning to go king salmon fishing, that might not be a good choice because on our trip, king salmon fishing didn't open until June 15th. So just something to consider when you're thinking about the dates and the travel seasons. All right, so a land trip. This is just one scenario. We work with lots of partners that do Alaska and that could do land trips. But one example is Adventures by Disney itinerary to Alaska. And this is great because it's a great company to work with for families. It's very inclusive of a lot of the activities. It has top-notch service, excellent hotels. They make travel really easy. So it is a great partner to work with when we think about a land-based trip in Alaska. And a lot of people like those multi-gen trips. They want to take their kids, for a senior high school trip. That's what we did. And so an Adventures by Disney trip is perfect for all of those things. So when you're looking at a land trip of Alaska, with this itinerary, for example, it is going round trip out of Anchorage. That's a big place to fly into when you think of Alaska. And it's going to go to some of the popular places. So it goes to Talkeetna, it goes to Denali National Park, and to Girdwood. And Denali National Park is obviously a big thing when people think about Alaska. That's where they call the big five are, the big animals that everybody wants to see in Alaska. It's just absolutely stunning and beautiful. But as you can see, it's a land trip. So you're in land. You're not on the water, where there's certain things you can see when you're on the water that you can't see when you're on land. So it is a land trip. There's trains involved. There's beautiful scenery and outdoor activities. And like I said, it goes round trip from Anchorage. So that is an option if you were looking for, a land trip. But we're going to talk a little bit more about cruise, and then we'll touch back on land a little bit when we talk about cruise tour. Okay, so when we talk about cruise, there's a couple of options. So first, we're going to talk about the basic cruise option. If you're only doing a cruise and not a cruise tour, you're most likely going to pick a round trip itinerary. You can do the open itinerary, which is usually paired with a cruise tour, but the northernmost departure port, whether you arrive or depart there, is a little bit tricky, and it's doing the land portion. So in most cases, when people are doing cruise only, they're doing a round trip, and you can go out of Seattle or Vancouver. It stays in the southeast region of Alaska. So it's staying along that part of Alaska that goes down and touches Canada. All of these itineraries and the cruise tours too, all have what I call like your mandatory stop in Victoria, British Columbia. So you have to go to a foreign port. And so especially if you're leaving out of Seattle, you'll see on the itinerary Victoria, British Columbia as a stop on your cruise. It is often the last night, and it is often for a very short period of time. And a lot of times it's over dinner. So it's not necessarily the port that you're picking for your cruise. It's not the one that you're probably going to worry about all that much. It's just kind of a mandatory legal port that they have to stop at. And so I just want to mention you're going to see that on itineraries a lot. And I don't know, I just kind of ignore it. It's just like it's a non-issue. So keep that in mind. The other thing is you're going to have a combination of ports and scenic cruising as you go up the coast. So certain parts of your itinerary will name a place, and then in parentheses, it'll say scenic cruising, which just means you're passing through that area because there's inside passages and different areas around land. And so you're going to get some of that scenic cruising. So you just want to keep that in mind. That's all just part of the round trip cruise experience. And we're going to dig deeper into the ports in a second. The other thing I just want to say is people are like, should I cruise out of Seattle? Should I cruise out of Vancouver? That's kind of like a hard question. So for a lot of people, I like to think about Seattle's a domestic port, Vancouver's a foreign port. So, does that make a difference for you as far as luggage? Okay. I know with some airlines and credit cards, you get free domestic luggage, but not international luggage. So maybe that makes a difference for you. Depending on where you're starting, there might be nonstop flights to one and not nonstop flights to the other. For example, from Philadelphia, there are nonstop flights to Seattle. There are not usually nonstop flights to Vancouver. So that can be a deciding factor for people. Do I want to go out of Seattle? Do I want to go out of Vancouver? They're not that far apart, so the itinerary after that isn't really a lot of difference. Some people will fly into Seattle and then do a day or two there and then go by land to Vancouver. So there's a lot of choices. You need a passport for this itinerary, or you should have a passport with you anyway. If you go out of Vancouver, you absolutely have to have a passport. If you go out of Seattle, it's not required, but it is highly recommended to always cruise with a passport. And it might depend on other parts of your itinerary, whether you need a passport or not. The other thing to remember is that all the itineraries include Canada in some way. And I'll just make a little side note that in Canada, they handle DUIs differently. So if you have a DUI anytime in your past, you'll want to address that and discuss that with someone before you book your Alaska cruise. All right, so let us touch base on the ports. We're going to dig in a little bit deeper. So one of the very popular ports is Juneau. You know that the capital of Alaska is Juneau? That's my favorite Alaska joke. There you go. So it is the capital of Alaska. And just some fun facts about Juneau. It is only accessible by plane or by boat. There are no roads from Juneau that go out into the mainland in any way. So the only way to get there is by plane or by boat, which is why it is one of the reasons it's a popular spot to stop in on an Alaskan cruise and something you wouldn't be able to do on a land trip to Alaska. It is a really cute walkable town. There is lots right there at the port area. Now, I'll say this, I didn't say this previously, but in Alaska, the ports, I don't know, and we might not really know before you get there whether your ship is docked at the port where you walk off and you walk into the city, or if you're at a slightly further away port and you're going to bus into the city. Some of them you walk in, some of them you bus in, or there's a transportation to get further into the city center, so to speak. None of these are big enough to really have a city center, but if you know what I mean. So, so I'm going to talk about once you get there, but it depends on the ship, and its location, whether it's like literally walk off the ship and you're there, or if you're going to have to like take a bus up or whatever. But in any case, Juneau is a super cute little town. It was a great day there, super fun to walk around. And one of the things that's really popular to do in Juneau is to visit the puppies and go to the sled dog summer camp, which is one of the things that we did. And so we got to see the most adorable little puppies, but then we also saw some older dogs and, of course, the sled dogs themselves. We learned a lot about the Iditarod. And actually, our guide has done the Iditarod and was training for another Iditarod. And so he has a passion for the animals. He has a passion for Alaska. And it was really great to have conversation with him and to learn about all of those things and all those traditions from someone who's done it. So that was really cool. But there is lots to do in Juneau, and some of the ports overlap with activities that you can do in multiple ports. But that's what we did in Juneau, and it was really great. The next port I want to talk about is Ketchikan. So Ketchikan is another great port, and it's popular. It's on a lot of itineraries. And as we go through these ports, they're not all going to be on one itinerary, most likely. So, you're going to have some combination of these ports. And so you can kind of see which ones have the activities that you want to do the most, or the things that are a deal breaker for you, and then build the cruise selection around that. So just keep that in mind. But anyway, in Ketchikan is another great port. It is, again, a very walkable little town once you get into the area. There are a few things to do there. So it is one of the best places to go fishing. It's called the salmon capital of the world. And so salmon fishing is really big there. But in Alaska, you can go fishing from various ports, and salmon and halibut are both pretty popular. But in Ketchikan, my son was able to catch an amazing king salmon, I think it is. I don't know that much about fish, but anyway, king salmon was open. We went on opening day for the season. So That was a really great experience and a great activity to do from Ketchikan. The other things that are good to do, or let me just touch base on fishing, stay there for a second. So, fishing is also good in Sitka, in Juneau, and Icy Strait Point. And like I said, halibut and salmon are the ones to fish for. So, Ketchikan overall, it looks like a Western town. There's lots of shops and souvenir shopping. I think we found probably some of our best souvenir shopping in Ketchikan, some of the bigger places that had, lots of the t-shirts with all the Alaska city names and all that kind of stuff. Some bigger places there that weren't, overly expensive, more of the souvenir shops. But there's also some like kind of local activities to do there if you're looking for something else. So two of the popular attractions there is the Great Alaskan Lumberjack Show and the Saxman Native Village. And sometimes you can do an excursion that combines the two of them. So the Lumberjack Show is pretty close into town. When we were walking around, we could hear people like hooting and hollering from the Lumberjack Show. It's right there. So that was really fun to hear. And then the Saxman Native Village is a little bit of a bus ride away, not super far. And that's a really neat experience too, to kind of go back in time and go back through their culture and see what they do. And we met like in a meeting house and saw some native dancing and met with the people and learned a little bit about totem pole making and some other things. So that was a really neat experience as well. And we learned a lot. It was a lot of fun. Okay, the next port we're going to talk about is Sitka. Now, most of the time when I talk about Sitka, the first thing people say is that where the proposal was filmed? And although Sitka was the setting of the proposal, the movie, it wasn't actually filmed there, although there are a few things in the movie that are from Sitka, but most of it was filmed, I think, like in New England, like Boston, Rhode Island, that kind of thing. But anyway, but that's kind of what puts Sitka maybe on the map where people heard of it. But anyway, the location of Sitka, there is a National Historic Park there. So it's actually Alaska's oldest national park, which is pretty cool. And then Sitka actually, and a large portion of Alaska, we kind of got from Russia. So Sitka was actually the location that in 1867, the land was transferred from Russia to the United States, being part of our territory. And so Sitka has a really interesting blend of both native cultures and Russian cultures. And so that's another really interesting thing about that port. And so when you get into the city area there, like I said, there's some national parks, one of the oldest ones. And then there's also, you can visit a Russian bishop's house, which is also a national park historical site, and kind of see some of that history and the Russian influence there. The other really interesting thing about Sitka is it's actually the largest city in the country, which seems odd to think of because we think of large as populated. But if you think of large as in space, Sitka is actually the largest. It's 2,870 square miles, which is like 5 times the size of Phoenix, Arizona. But it only has 14 miles of roads. So it's a really big city, but there's not that many different places to go. So that's kind of interesting. So it's a great place to walk around. There's a lot of little shops there. It's more like small town America than like souvenirs, but we found like a lot of like smoked salmon, like salmon jerky and like different places you could taste some different things. There were some restaurants, some coffee shops, some like stationery stores. I mean, you could buy souvenirs there, but it wasn't like the mecca of souvenirs kind of a thing. And we walked around some of the national parks and looked at that as well. I have a special little blue book of the national parks that I get stamped in all the national parks that I go to. So anytime there's a national park nearby, I'm like, I gotta go get my book stamped. So that's kind of fun. If you don't want to just walk around and stuff, one of the great things to do out of Sitka, in addition to the fishing that we talked about previously, is some wildlife, like whale watching and stuff like that. There can be some great wildlife excursions that you might look for in Sitka. All right, so let us move on to Icy Strait Point. So Icy Strait Point is another really interesting port. This is a real nature-focused port. It's not much of a town per se. There is a town there, but it's like not right there where the port is. So this is more of like a nature, outdoor kind of experience, and it's really fun. So, whale watching can be good here if you want to go on excursion from, off in the water. There's also a very large zip line. I think it's like the largest in somewhere. Largest in Alaska, largest in North America, largest in the world. I don't know. It's the largest of something. But there's a large zip line, which is really fun. And it's a short walk from the ship. And you can kind of walk around there's nature trails. When we were there was a big bonfire outside. So you could smell like, campfire. And there was all these nature trails to walk around. One of the really fun things is the gondolas. So there's two sets of gondolas. There are complimentary gondolas that take you from one side to the other. And if you're watching, that's the picture that I have on this slide of the gondola. So it's kind of fun just to take it over and you get some beautiful views and go to the other side of the area. And then we actually walked back on the nature trails. So we kind of did a little bit of both. There's a second gondola that goes up really high to a high point. That one you have to pay for. So if you're looking for, really that high view of a lot of the area, you would want to pay to go on that one. But otherwise, we just did the free one and went across to the other side and then walked back. There's also renovated cannery. So in 1912, this was a big place for canning salmon and fishing and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of like a little kids museum, but very small. But it's kind of like a renovated cannery, and you can kind of see like how they went through the process of canning salmon and processing it and stuff. There's actually an old cemetery. There's a restaurant. There was just like interesting things to kind of walk around and look at. So it was a really kind of interesting port and just kind of a fun place to walk around and get out in nature. Some of the trails were like giving instructions about if you saw bears, what to do. They told us to stay in large groups when we were walking and be loud. So it really is kind of that nature encounter. We didn't see any bears, but one of the trails was closed for bears, and I just kind of laughed because it was like, that trail's next to this trail. So I don't know. But anyway, we were fine. It was great. It was a really fun outdoor activity. We were there in the evening. This was kind of funny because it's a little sidebar, but my daughter and I got off the ship after dinner to go check it out because, hey, I'm there and this is what I do. I got to go find out everything. So she came along with me and we went and checked out, all the areas that you could go to and try everything out. And I'm kind of an early bird. I like to go to bed like at 9, even on vacation. I don't like to stay up real late, but in any case, we went out, we did our big adventure, we were hiking, we took lots of pictures, we were having a grand old time. We come back to the ship and I get back to the room and my husband and my sons are all in the room eating pizza, which is the last thing we do before going to bed. And my husband yells at me and he's like, "Where have you been?" And I was like, I told you we were going out to Icy Strait Point. And he's like, "Do you know what time it is?" I said, "No." And I looked at my watch. It was like 11:30 at night. He's like, "I can't believe you're still up." And I was like, "The sun is not setting." So I didn't really realize how late it was. I mean, we did go after dinner, so it makes sense that it would have gotten that late, but I really lost track of time because it didn't really get. Alrighty, so the next port we're going to go to is Skagway. So Skagway is really was put on the map during the gold rush. So when you think of the Alaska gold rush, the Klondike, and all of those things, you're thinking about Skagway. And there's some really unique things that you can do in Skagway that you really can't do in other ports. So I would kind of say go in that direction if these things interest you and it's on your itinerary. But in any case, one of the big things up there is the White Pass Scenic Railway. And that is a scenic trail ride through the Klondike. And so there's also the Klondike Gold Rush National Historical Park. And so there's a lot of activities up there. There's different train ride lengths. Usually there's like a shorter one, a mid half day one, a full day one. They can be combined with like gold panning and other like things related to the gold rush or more scenic or whatever. So those are like the two main things that happen in Skagway is the gold rush stuff and the panning and the train. And if you're not doing a cruise tour, this is probably the only kind of chance you have to do a train in Alaska and do that scenic train ride. So if you're not doing a cruise tour, having Skagway on your itinerary is awesome. And looking for that White Pass Scenic Railway is probably a really good idea to try to do that. So just a really unique experience, really fun. So that is Skagway. So those are kind of the main ports you usually hit on an Alaska itinerary. Some combination of those, probably 3, 2, 3, 4 of those. Okay, so then the other thing that you're going to see on all the Alaska itineraries, no matter what you're doing, is glaciers. And that's what everybody wants to see when they go to Alaska. They're like, I want to see glaciers. So you're going to see glaciers. There's a couple different ways to see this. And I remember when I was first digging into Alaska itineraries, I was looking at all the glaciers until my eyes blurred. And I was like, how do I know which one is the right one to go to? So let me just put it this way. If you've never seen a glacier before, it probably doesn't matter. In my mind, they're all amazing. So it really probably doesn't matter. If you're a glacier connoisseur, if you're really into nature and science and geology and all of these, whatever other ologies there are that are related to glaciers, you might have a preference. But for most people, it probably doesn't matter too much which one you do. There is like two categories. So I will say some ships go to Glacier Bay National Park. I told you I have my little blue book and I love my national parks. So I did pick an itinerary that went to Glacier Bay National Park because I really wanted my book stamped. And so you don't get off the ship, but they brought naturalists on board and the park service came on board and I was able to get my passport, my national parks book stamped for Glacier Bay National Park. So if you're a national parks person and you're checking off your national parks, then you'll want an itinerary that goes to Glacier Bay National Park. Otherwise, it probably doesn't matter all that much. So I will say that there's only a few cruise lines that do go to Glacier Bay National Park. So this is something to keep in mind as we're picking which itinerary and everything. But there's only allowed to be two big ships in Glacier Bay per day in the summer. It's really a protected area. So if that's important to you, that's going to narrow down your choices a little bit. So Princess Cruises, Holland America Line, and Norwegian Cruise Line all have itineraries that go to Glacier Bay National Park. If you're not on one of those three cruise lines, or if that ship is not going to Glacier Bay National Park, you will probably go to one of these other glaciers. Some of these might be familiar to you, but there's Hubbard Glacier. There's Tracy Arm Fjord, where they're in Tracy Arm Fjord is Sawyer Glacier. There's College Fjord, which is kind of interesting because the glaciers there have names of different colleges. And then there's Endicott Arm and Dawes Glacier, and then Mendenhall Glacier. Mendenhall Glacier is not really accessible. It is a glacier you can see, but I should clarify this isn't going to be one you're going to be doing during scenic cruising because that's really only accessible another way. It's not really right there on the path of the cruise ship. So Mendenhall Glacier, you would most likely, if you wanted to see that, you would do that on an excursion from Juneau, is most likely the way you would see the glaciers. But when you're out on the water and you're out on the ship and they're around you and you spend some time near them, you can hear them calving. You just can watch them. It's really, really outstanding. It's amazing. The other way to experience glaciers is on like a helicopter or plane excursion. And like I said, from Juneau, you can do that. And some of the other ports will have, a lot of the ports will have helicopter or plane excursions. And you'll look for in those excursions basically what you want to do. Some will land and let you walk on the glacier and have activities like that. Some will fly over. Some will go to multiple and fly over. Some will only go to one and go to more depth. So these are all things you can kind of see what you want to do. My son and my husband did a flyover of 5 glaciers. So they didn't land and walk, they went to more, and they kind of got to see the different sizes and how they are different. But at the end of the day, a glacier, in our limited ability of knowledge of glaciers, are all kind of the same. So it was interesting for sure to see them and keep seeing them and see how they were different and let's look at them. But, you know, I'm a simple person. A glacier is a glacier. So you will definitely see glaciers. It kind of is Glacier Bay National Park and national park access important to you, or is just any glacier is fine? And then again, you can add that extra access by doing an excursion so you can see it from a different perspective, or like I said, land on a glacier, which is pretty cool, and walk around. Very different than just when you're on the ship. But that would only be like via an excursion or something. So the next thing I'm just going to say is being on a cruise ship in Alaska is so scenic. And again, if you're not watching this, you're going to want to look at this picture. But this is from my, phone and my poor photography skills. But this is literally the back of the deck on the ship where we're literally just can eat lunch or wherever. And we're just surrounded by mountains and like snow and all this stuff is absolutely wild when you're standing there and you're looking up and you're that close to these big formations and everything. It's just unbelievable. So a lot of times during the cruise, you're seeing different things from the ship along the way. There's a lot of scenery. You're near land, once you get past like that initial part and you start to get into Alaska, you'll start to see land various times throughout the day around you, even when you're not particularly in a spot. So just absolutely stunning, stunning views. It's really something to behold. It changes your perspective on the world sometimes to see something so big when you're so small. Okay, so let us talk a little bit about cruise tours. So I have some maps here if you're watching, and the bottom map kind of shows a bigger kind of like coming out of Vancouver, hitting up some of those ports that we talked about, and then heading up to your endpoint. So in a cruise tour, you're going to hear some words on this. So you might hear the word open jaw. That is kind of what you think about with a cruise because it's open, it's not round trip. It starts in one place and ends in one place. So they're all going to start or end in Seattle or Vancouver like the other ones do, but they're open jaw. So the other end is either going to be Whittier or Seward, depending on the cruise line. Both of those places are coastal where the ship can get in and drop everyone off. There's really nothing there. So once you get there, you will transfer by bus or train to Anchorage. And that's kind of where you start more of the activities of the tour part of this cruise tour. So when you're looking at itineraries for Alaska and you're looking for cruise tour, you're going to see northbound, southbound. So if it's a northbound cruise, it means it's going to start in either the Seattle or Vancouver and it's going to end in either Whittier or Seward, meaning that your tour is after. So you're going to do the cruise first and then the tour part, land part after on a northbound. If it's southbound, that means your tour is going to be before. So you're going to fly into Anchorage or Fairbanks or something like that. You're going to do your tour and then you're going to be taken to either Seward or Whittier, and then you're going to take the cruise and end in either Seattle or Vancouver, okay, going south. So people will ask, what do you think is better? So this is just personal preference, but I feel that the northbound is better. And the reasons I like northbound better is because I think you have less risk flying into either Seattle or Vancouver as far as your flight. So you fly in one day ahead, you have no problem like missing the boat kind of a thing. If you're flying into Fairbanks or Anchorage, there's less flights that go there. And so if you have a flight disruption, it can be harder to get caught up. So I like the idea of doing the pre or doing the northbound so that you're flying into Seattle or Vancouver for a maybe more seamless start to your trip. The other reason I like that is because unless you're traveling from the West Coast, you're going to have a couple of hour time change. It's 3 hours to Seattle, and then once you're heading up to Alaska, you're going to lose another hour. And so having the first part of a day in Seattle or Vancouver, boarding the ship, which is like you're not really going anywhere that day, then you might have like a day at sea while it's starting to head up to the ports, gives you a little bit of time to adjust before you start seeing the spectacular things you went on this trip to see. Where if you do the pre-trip, you're kind of got to like hit the ground running when you land because you're immediately on your cruise tour and all the things that you really want to see. And so you don't have as much time to adjust. So I think it's a little bit easier to go into the northbound itinerary where you kind of start in the Seattle, gives you a day, you start on your way. And then by the time you're, really head on into all of the things that you came to see. You're adjusted to the time and you're in your groove and all that jazz. And then if there's any flight disruptions or problems on the way home, you'll spend another day in either Fairbanks or Anchorage, but at least you haven't missed anything of your trip. So I think that that's really the safer bet, in my opinion, to do the northbound. Hopefully that makes sense for that. The land portion of the cruise tour really varies. So when you're booking a cruise tour, you'll see like 20 options. Like once you narrow down to a particular cruise line, you might see like 20 options. You're like, oh my gosh, how do I even look at this? So basically, though, a lot of them are either the pre or the before or after. So it's the same tour, it's just where it's located. So you can basically cut that list in half. And then there are different lengths. So there's 2 day, 3 day, 4 day, 5 day, 7 day. So of the cruise of the tour portion. So, how much time you have and other things will come into play for that. And then they're really focused on different experiences. So some have trains, some don't, some have more wildlife, some have more activities, some have gold panning, some have this, some have that. So you kind of have to think about like, what is it that I really want to see and do while I'm here? And once you kind of pick out those activities and a time frame, you can really start narrowing it down. And that's something we can help you do. But just to give you an idea of what you're looking at. Okay. And then most of the cruise tours will either start or end with a flight into Fairbanks or Anchorage, Alaska, even though the transition point is that Seward and Whittier from cruise to tour. But at the end of the day, you're going to either fly home or fly into Anchorage or Fairbanks. Okay. So that is a little bit about the cruise tour portion. Okay, so now that you have all this information, I'm just going to close with a little bit about how, like the process of how to pick this. So this is kind of my recommendation on this. So picking the right cruise. So my recommendation is first to figure out whether you want to do cruise tour, or land. Obviously, if you want to do land, the cruise piece is out and we start looking at other suppliers. But if you want to do cruise or cruise tour, that will narrow things down. Not every cruise line has a cruise tour option. Okay, so that kind of narrows things down at that point. Once you determine that, the next thing you want to think about is if you really want to cruise out of Seattle or Vancouver, because ultimately, regardless of cruise tour or round trip, at some point you're going to be in Seattle or Vancouver. Okay. So you kind of have to figure that out. Some cruise lines only go out of Vancouver. Some cruise lines have both. Some may only be Seattle. So if you have a strong preference on that, that'll help sort things out a little bit for you as well. And then lastly, I would match you to the right cruise line. So out of the cruise lines that have the trip that you really want, which cruise line is going to be a better fit if there's more than one choice? I don't feel too attached to the cruise line on Alaska because I feel like it's more about the destination than the ship. When you're cruising in the Caribbean, for example, I feel like it's mostly about the ship and not so much about the destination. It's fun, it's sun, they're kind of circling around the Caribbean. It's all about the ship and the experience and the food and the shows and the entertainment and the kids clubs and all those things. When you're in Alaska, for me, it was all about Alaska. So I was like, who's going to get me there? One thing to think about when you think about the ship too is ships built for Alaska. Some ships are better for Alaska than others. In my opinion, some ships were built for the Caribbean and are used in Alaska, and some ships were built with Alaska in mind. So when I'm looking at a cruise ship for myself, I would look for ones that have large observation lounges or interior spaces with large glass windows that allow you to be inside and see large views of the outside. Ships that have those large lounges or spaces that you can see out is a big deal because it could be cool and rainy and you might not want to be sitting outside on deck all that time. And a lot of the outdoor deck space might be kind of toward the center of the ship, like around where the pools are, which don't give you great views of the outside. So you want to have things that have either on the stern or the bow, either observation lounges or large open deck areas. If they're like top decks, so like when we were on our ship, there was a pickleball clinic one day. So we're like, let's go do that. We love pickleball. We were sitting out on deck on the ship, and this ship had a large observation lounge. So that was great. We spent most of our time there. But we wanted to go play pickleball, and it was impossible. The wind was insane. So although you had great views up there, the wind was just, kind of intolerable. It got to that point where I was like, I can't be up here anymore, even with my hat on and everything. It's just too windy. So being in that observation lounge was golden. So having that as an option for when the weather's not cooperative is fantastic. When it's beautiful and you can sit out on deck and have beautiful views outside, take advantage. Get out there, get out on your balcony in your stateroom. Awesome. A little less windy on the stateroom balconies because there's more like I don't know, coverage. You're not quite as out there as like on the top of the ship. But think about if the ship is built for Alaska. If you're trying to pick between two ships or two cruise lines, the itineraries are similar. A lot of things are similar. Look at the ship. What does it have for outdoor spaces or lounges with large viewing areas? Because I think that that's a big deal. You can go in the other direction. If the cruise is not really the most important thing, and you're traveling with a bunch of people that need to have certain amenities or things. So I'm thinking about if you're traveling with a lot of little kids and you feel like we're going to see Alaska. It's fine. I'm not too worried about certain aspects of it. I just need like good kids clubs and I need like things for the kids to do because they might get bored and I want to go out on deck and look at things and I'll deal with that, but I need them to have things to do. Then you might go back to cruise line first and be like, what cruise lines are my kids going to do really well on? And then from there, I will pick the ship that's going to do what I need it to do. That is the other direction you can go. But unless you have a particular need, again, if maybe you have a food allergy and you really feel most comfortable with a particular cruise line for your food allergy or something like that, you can go in the other direction, start with cruise line, and then see what they have, what their options are if you have that strong cruise loyalty. Otherwise, though, if you haven't cruised a ton, I would start in the other direction, like I had said, thinking about whether you want to do a cruise tour or not, whether you want to go to Seattle or Vancouver, if that matters to you, then start working into looking at the actual ships. And if it has a port, that's really important to you too. And then narrow it down that way is kind of my advice on that. So, you should be here. You should be in Alaska. It is an absolutely amazing, life-changing destination to see. I hope it's on your bucket list. If it's not, it should be. If you've been, you might want to go back and do it a little bit differently this time because there's just so much to see and there's really not you just can't do it all in one trip. So we can help you sort through all those things. Magical Memory Planners are here to help. A large number of our agents have been in Alaska on various cruise lines. I think we've been on like 5 different cruise lines, and about 15 of us have all cruised in Alaska. So we have a wide variety of resources to help each other and help you really match you with the best experience and help you have an amazing Alaska vacation.